It was our last day relaxing at the cabin, and we decided to take a morning walk around the lake. Wendy wanted to collect some fallen pine cones, and I just wanted to breathe in that cold November air one last time. Wendy was always gathering things along our walks. Flowers here, a branch there, whatever tickled her and grabbed hold of her attention. Everything in nature seemed to fill her with joy and bring peace to her spirit. It is one of the things I most love about her. The three of us, Wendy, Brutus and I, stepped off the rickety porch of the small cabin and began our stroll. The sky was a perfect blue that day. No clouds, no wind. An icy blue sky with the sun tucked into a corner just above the horizon. I remember it well. Like any good lake trail, this trail stayed close to the water. The cabin was a short hike from the main lake trail, so within a few minutes we were on the trail. The rippling water to our left. The ground was still wet from a heavy rainstorm that had pounded the area a few nights prior. Our feet made smooshing sounds with each soggy step. Brutus was in a playful spirit, running ahead several hundred feet, turning and waiting, running back to rejoin us, happy tail wagging the whole time. Walking further along, the vegetation got a bit thicker, and then the trail twisted slightly to the right, away from the lake and into the edges of a forest. Normally, the forest was alive with sounds, but it was eerily silent that day. "You hear that?" Wendy said. "Hear what?" I replied. "Exactly," Wendy said. "Yeah. Quiet." "I don't like it," said Wendy. We were several minutes into our walk when Brutus began acting strangely. His playful demeanor was gone, and he began to sniff the air. He was on alert. The hair on his back stood up. He stopped, looked around, as though anticipating something important was about to happen. He sniffed the air again, sniffed the ground, looked at me. Then, he let out a long, low growl. He walked up to Wendy, sat in front of her and looked up into her eyes. He let out a whimper. Something wasn't right. Wendy bent down. "Hey, Bruty. You okay, buddy?" She scruffed him under his neck. Brutus leaned into Wendy's leg and closed his eyes, chin up and extended, exposing his neck to get even more love and pets. "Is he okay?" I approached. "I think he's fine," she said. "Probably smells another animal." I had seen Brutus catch the scent of another animal before. I had hiked well over 1,000 miles with this dog, across all types of terrain and through all weather. I even once had to help him out of a hole he fell into chasing a rabbit across a field. He was often raising his snout to the wind, to measure and explore his surroundings. This was different. He was curious, but I knew immediately he wouldn't be giving chase to whatever he smelled. He was curious, but also afraid. I had not seen this before. He pounced on the trail, splashing up mud all around. He was covered in brown. "Well, I guess we'll need to go back to the cabin one last time for a doggy bath," I said, looking at Wendy. She looked back at me, smiling. "He's your dog," she said. "Yes, but you love him the most." She cooed at Brutus. "Little fur baby," she said. His odd behavior continued. He seemed unsure of himself, but full of energy. He vigorously sniffed all around. He would occasionally stop, growl, and sometimes whimper. For several minutes this behavior went on. Then, he bolted his head upright, eyes wild and ablaze with fear. He ran to Wendy. He stopped in the trail, turned around to face her. His hair stood up on his back again, and he growled. Not at her, though. In the moment, it genuinely felt like he was barking to warn her, warn us, of some unseen danger. Then, he began barking. Brutus is not a barker, so it was more than a little startling. I actually jumped a bit when he barked. It was so unexpected. Wendy approached him, lowering herself to his level. "Hey, buddy. You're okay," she pet him again under his chin. He calmed down a bit, but then quickly pulled his head from her touch and swiveled it to the right, then to the left, then up. His eyes were wide open again and full of fright. Then he turned around and sat down on the trail, facing away from us. We approached from behind him, offering soft cooing words of encouragement and comfort. Without looking at us, without turning his head to acknowledge us, he stood up quickly. Then he bolted down the trail and away from us. He did so at top speed, low to the ground in a full sprint. Barely any noise, just flying down the muddy trail, tail straight behind and nose pointed forward. In all of the years I've hiked, camped, played with and cared for Brutus, he has never, not once, ran off from me. This was a first, and it immediately put me into a state of concern, bordering on panic. Wendy and I locked eyes. "Go," she said, and pointed down the trail and toward Brutus. I instantly started running as quickly as I could after him, calling for him to come back. I was running, and I was scared. Below me, I could feel the wet ground splash, spraying mud with every pounding step. Brutus wouldn't be the only one needing a clean-up, I thought, feeling the mud start to cake itself to my legs. I don't believe I had ever run so fast before in my life. All I heard was the pounding of my shoes into the wet ground, and my breath getting deeper with every flying stride. About a quarter of a mile onward, the trail bent, and the landscape slowly shifted, away from the lake and into a small forest. The trail bend was enough for me to lose sight of Brutus. I came around the bend, and the trail straightened out in front of me, nearly a half-mile of straight, unobstructed trail, and Brutus was not on it. I kept running, calling Brutus' name. I stopped, listened, called his name. Again I did this, and again. I could hear Wendy getting closer, her distance marked and measured by the closeness of her similar calls. She was worried, I could tell. She was still out of sight, but I could hear the alarm growing in her voice. It couldn't have been more than a few minutes of this calling and frantic searching before I heard Brutus barking. In less than a half second, I was on the run, into the forest, through bramble and bush, toward the sound of his barking. His barking was frenetic and angry. I could hear, even at a distance, lots of furious movement, branches snapping and ground being pulled. He was in a fight. I needed to get to him. Nearly out of breath, I kept running, jumping over fallen trees, hopping over rocks, pushing branches and leaves out of my face as I sped through the forest, a madman on a mission to save his friend. Suddenly, the elevation quickly dropped in front of me into a small ravine. I was standing on the bank of a little creek, no more than 4 or 5 feet across. On the other of the creek, the bank rose sharply and high, such that it created a sort of dirt wall. There was a small crevice in the wall, too small to be called a cave, but too large to be thought of as anything else. Standing at the entrance of this break in the mud wall, his head poking in up to his neck, was Brutus, barking with menace and fury. I climbed down the bank and gingerly stepped my way across the creek. I was about to place my foot on a rock that was standing proud from the creek by a few inches, when I stopped, unable to process what I was looking at. Brutus was in a fight, but with what? I cannot say, from my vantage point. Standing there in the middle of the cold and flowing creek, it looked like he was biting and snipping at some sort of dark creature. A cat of some sort. A bear. No, a shadow. I honestly have no other way to describe it other than a shadow creature. It was dark and translucent, with shape but no real substance. I could see the darkness dart outward from the dark hole, and then toward Brutus. It moved like smoke, curling upward into itself, and then bursting outward with intention. Brutus would recoil and whimper, and then regain his courage, bark and drive the darkness back into the dirt hole. I saw all of this unfold within the few seconds I was moving from one bank to the other, to reach my friend. I was terrified, but knew I had one job, and that was to grab my dog and get the hell out of there. I approached Brutus from behind and said his name. He didn't react to me, but kept his focus on the shadow. I gently placed my hand on his haunches. He turned and saw me, and for a second relaxed. But he quickly remembered he was in a fight, tensed up again and lunged at the shadow. I believe he would have chased that shadow into the cave if I hadn't managed to grab hold of his collar. I was able to pull him away from the hole, lift his hind legs, and cradle him like I did the day I adopted him when he was just a puppy. I clenched him hard against my chest. His hind legs tucked like a giant football under my right forearm, and his front legs and neck under my left. I wasted no time. I started to run toward the trail like my life depended on it, because it very likely did. I ran back over the same overgrown, bramble-filled forest floor I had arrived on. Even though I was now carrying a fully grown Labrador, and even though I was fatigued and in need of water, I traversed that terrain back to the trail in about 1/3 of the time it took the first time. With each step, I felt both closer to safety and at the same time in greater danger than the step before. Brutus had amped up his snarling energy, fighting to break free and protect me from whatever was chasing us. And it was absolutely chasing us. I could hear breaking twigs and brush, staying tight on our heels. It was then that I saw Wendy. Wendy was about 100 feet from us when I saw her. She was briskly walking our way when we spotted each other. She shouted to me, "I'll get the SUV," and then turned and ran. My feet were aching and cold, and Brutus was getting heavy. Wendy was a strong runner and would have no problem beating us back to the cabin. It was a long run. 2, maybe 3 miles. Brutus' energy had not dwindled and had in fact picked up intensity. He was trying to twist out of my grasp, all the time barking, snarling and biting the air. The only comfort he offered was warmth from his body against mine, cold as the day was. After several seconds, I looked downward at Brutus and saw 3 large marks running down the length of his back. He was bleeding, from claw marks of some sort. I had never seen wounds like that before. I clenched him tighter to my chest and ran harder. I never once looked back. I didn't want to see. I just wanted to get Brutus to the SUV. To warmth. To safety. Brutus kept moving, twisting and fighting to escape as I ran, but I was somehow able to keep hold of him, at least for a long time. And then, when we were getting close to the cabin trail, I fell to my knees. I just couldn't run anymore. I knelt, Brutus still in my clutch. I hugged him close and started to cry. It was then that I heard all manner of branches breaking, rocks flying and dirt being thrown. It was a lot of commotion, and it was Wendy, in the SUV, driving toward us. Within seconds, Wendy pulled the car directly in front of Brutus and me. She jumped out of the car and ran to us. I lifted Brutus to her, and she took him, opened the back door and put in him the car. He didn't fight her. She came back for me, helped me on my feet and to the car. I had barely closed the door to the car and was putting my seatbelt on, and already, Wendy had backed up the car, turned it around on the trail and was speeding through the forest to safety. Knowing I was safe, that Wendy had saved us, I crumpled in the seat, passed out from exhaustion. I only awoke as we pulled into the emergency vet clinic. The vet who took care of Brutus said she'd never seen a scar like the 3 marks on his back. With ample rest and a large dose of antibiotics for good measure, Brutus was fine. I don't know what I saw in the forest that day, what attacked Brutus and caused him to bleed. I don't think I ever want to know. I never walk with Brutus off leash anymore, and we haven't been back to the cabin since. We'll probably sell it. If you're interested in a small lakeside cabin with hiking trails and a murderous shadow creature nearby, let me know. I'll make you a good deal.